Hey everyone, this is Jonathan with Underpromoted, and today I'm really happy to have Awonder on the channel. Awonder, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I thought we could just get right into it. There's a lot of good articles and news just about your chess journey from when you're growing up, and there's a lot of records that you broke. But nowadays, we can talk more about starting out as a professional or just how you think about it. And one question I had is in different interviews, you've talked about how a lot of the ways you've progressed and a lot of the work you did simply came from doing what you enjoyed. Um, but I think as you keep getting more into the elite, like, top 30, maybe further up, depending on how things go, like, how do you think about the possibility that you might have to sacrifice more things or kind of just work on things that don't come as naturally?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I'm like really at the level where I need to sacrifice so much because, mm, let's say, right now I'm like number 25 in the world or thereabouts. Like it's not really like a super high mm, level, I think, and also the rating doesn't reflect much. Like I haven't really like won any or really even competed um in many major events. So yeah, I spend a lot of time on chess and I think I work a reasonable amount, but I think it's really not on the level of, let's say, the other top players, like the Indian players or the Uzbek players. And yeah, maybe that's a little bit of a problem because, let's say they're probably more talented than me and also they're working a lot more than me and they have teams and so on. So probably it's not a good sign for the overall development of my chess career. I don't know. I think things generally are going pretty well right now. Like I think I'm learning a lot more things that I don't know about chess. And so the way I kind of view it is, I spent a lot of time in college and I wasn't really doing chess full time. I was maybe doing a little bit of chess on the side. Um, and so it's kind of like just by doing the stuff I enjoy, I'm already like learning a lot of the things that I already didn't know about chess. And and maybe like let's say the last couple percent that we're trying to eke out at the higher levels like that, maybe you have to like start doing things that are a little bit more laborious or tedious. And but yeah, I really don't think I'm at that level yet, and so I kind of just keep doing what I like and maybe not working as hard as I should. Um but yeah, I think for me right now, like let's say like around like the low 2700s, my general estimation is that it's kind of like, wait, it sounds strange to say, but it's like generally not really a very high level of chess, and so there are like huge gains to be made just by like doing the fundamentals and learning the basics and things like that. So it's mostly just about like staying consistent and um just getting the basics down at a pretty high level, and then I think from there on, like it's kind of like a Pareto type distribution. So the work gets exponentially harder to climb up, and so do the rewards. So it's kind of, like, um, it's sort of linear in log space, right?
There's that guideline, like, you can get 80% of the results with 20% of the effort. Where do you feel like you're kind of reaching the end of the 80% and squeezing into maybe the last bit where you have to give 1% of work for 1% of result?
That's kind of hard to say because I actually don't even know like really where I am yet, right? Like it hasn't really gone downhill at any point. So I've kind of just, I think, let's say in the past year and a half, I've started playing more chess and taking it a little bit more seriously. And it's kind of felt like, okay, I've just worked more. And then the results have just naturally been coming. So um, I think when I first started in 2024 was when I started seeing huge gains. Like in the summer, um, but that was kind of a strange year for me in general because I think I was just extremely hot in like many facets, not just chess. And and things were just running really well for me. So I think it was a bit of luck involved too. Um, and yeah, and last year in 2025, it was a lot more up and down. It was very choppy. But in general, like I had an impression that, if I was doing more work and just getting that, like results were just coming, not with any particular difficulty. Like it was sometimes down. Um, but yeah, normally it was just because I wasn't really like putting in enough work. So yeah, it's very hard for me to say because, um, technically I think almost every month I'm kind of at my peak rating, and so it's not really been slowing down for for a while. I mean, it's kind of, let's say, mm, like sometimes internally I feel like, okay, this is kind of difficult and I'm working a lot and it's very tiring. But I've never really felt uh, like unmotivated. I think the only thing is like, so yeah, it's very hard to draw um like, okay, specific, like now is the time to start locking in more, and let's do all these other things that the top players are doing. Let's hire like a mental coach and this and that. No, I don't really feel that way yet, but yeah, I guess we'll just have to see how the next couple of years play out, right?
One thing you said that sounds kind of funny, about being in the low 2700s and still that there's a lot of maybe low hanging fruit or at least obvious ways you can improve. Sometimes I think when we hear about elite chess as amateurs, it feels like, oh, people are just studying openings and that's like maybe the only place they can try to find some advantage. What to you makes it feel like there's still so many obvious areas you can improve?
Well, it's kind of tricky because I think if you look at it like strictly from an ELO perspective, um, like basically a 2750 player or every 50 points of ELO is like roughly around like a 5% difference in expected value. That means in the course of like a 9 round tournament, they're only really expected to score like half a point more, right? And so there's sort of an element where I'm looking at my tournaments and, let's say in this tournament, I'm blowing like 4 half points. On average, if I just collect like one extra one of those, that means that's already like 2750 strengths, right? And so it's kind of this interesting problem where, um, it, it it's actually like a very small difference, but it's kind of enormously difficult to cross that bridge. But I think the other thing I would say is that like, mm, I mean, humans in general, like we're pretty bad at most things. I mean, I think in the sense that it's hard to be correct in a lot of different. I mean, just like being right or being good at things is very difficult. Um, and so like I'm really just trying to eke out this small 5% to, let's say, cross into the top 10. And it's yeah, I think when I look at it from that aspect, it's like, okay, like there are so many specific games where, let's say, I didn't prepare well or I wasn't sleeping well, and that might have messed up. There's so many games where I just missed this tactic. So let's say if I just practiced tactics more, maybe I would have just collected this extra half point in, and then there's already, right. So I think when it comes to like my past year and in, let's say, 2025, and probably there were, at least like 10 or 15 half points which were just extremely obvious. Like I make like one different move or two different moves and I already get it there. So and that's not to say that like it's easy to do. Because if it was easy to do, then probably other people would have already done it. But it's just in the sense that there are a lot of opportunities around, and I think part of what I'm trying to do is just pick up like a little bit more of those. And it doesn't even have to be like I pick up every single one, right? It's just like I'm just looking for like one extra half point every 10 games. Which, yeah, it's kind of this funny thing because as I said, when you frame it that way, it sounds like very little. On the other hand, that's kind of the entire goal of what everyone is trying to achieve. Um, so yeah, in that sense, I think there are a lot of basic things that I can do to get those things. Like, let's say in certain games, I might not have prepared the opening. I just forgot my line, right? So I would just review, and then if I didn't forget that line, I wouldn't have lost that half point. Um, other games where different types of very simple mistakes you can make, and I think it's more like when you get to the more elite levels, what I noticed from the top players is they're a lot more disciplined. They're a lot more like, let's say, physically fit. So there's a lot less of that like really low hanging fruit of like, I just forgot my opening line and bam, like I lost the game because of that. And I think that makes a bigger difference. So what they're working on is a little bit different from what I'm working on, I'd say.
Yeah. It's interesting. What did you study in college?
I did economics and I mean, I say applied math, but it was some long majors like computational and applied math. Yeah.
Because I feel like the way you talk about chess, it has a lot of those concepts. Like, for elite players, it seems like they have less variance in their performance. Or you're talking about kind of getting like investing, like the compounding effect of having these little gains. Do you feel like that's a relatively less common way that chess players think about it? Or do you feel like a lot of your friends or peers also have that mindset?
I think some of how like they act, they understand these concepts. It's kind of hard to tell. Like I think Hikaru, let's say, comes from like I'm not sure if he does like trading or investing, but I know he's definitely like actively trading specific tickers in the market. So like let's say he understands um these concepts of like variance at like a very intrinsic level. I think also a lot of chess players like playing poker, and so you really get a feel of like variance at a very intuitive level. I'm not sure if they think this way, but let's say like one thing I notice about a lot of the young successful players, for instance, is that they have a tendency to, let's say, get very hot at certain times, and they like know and understand that they're hot, and so they go like extremely hard when they are. And I think this is kind of like a classic, mm, like I think it's very good habit, because you can have like a string of extremely good results and they feel the momentum. It's not like extremely clear to me if that's like something they intuitively do or if they understand that this is a good principle. But I noticed like, let's say Arvind, when he was making the climb to 2750, okay, he's dropped a little bit since then. But he was just playing nonstop, right? Like back to back to back tournaments. Um, I think Keimer also went extremely nuclear at the end of 2025 and climbed to like 2770. So I think you kind of see these elements of like, okay, we understand that this is a game and we're trying to, let's say, maximize our expected value. Um, and I think a lot of chess players that are successful, kind of, let's say if they don't consciously think this way, they do act in that way. And part of what makes chess kind of interesting is that it's kind of a mimetic thing, right? So we kind of look at how other successful players rose to the top, and then we try and emulate or copy what they did. So it's like it kind of spreads throughout. Um, to the extent that like they consciously think like, okay, maybe if I play this opening, I have like X% chance better of winning. That's probably not how they consciously calculate those things, but I think yeah, you don't really need to have like let's say a super rigorous understanding to apply in the real world. And yeah, so I feel like a lot of the young players they understand these concepts and they're able to apply them very well. On the other hand, I think for me sometimes I try to play like I'm trying too much to do the meta thinking of like what will be successful and what will work. And I mean sometimes I think I forget to play the actual game like oh let's like actually calculate some lines and not just like think like strategically like oh maybe if I play this opening at this point in the tournament I'll have like a better chance of winning. So yeah, I think I tend to veer too much into trying to optimize that thing, and I forget like oh maybe I just hung my rook, and then I don't think that much thinking will save you. So at the end of the day, yeah, I think most players are pretty focused on the chess, and um, but yeah, I think they do think about these things.
But there's also an element, in behavioral economics where it's like the assumption that we can apply these principles or statistics rationally is not always a good assumption. Like a lot of times, what people end up doing is actually against the odds. Like, so do you think, there's also room that maybe sometimes there's bad applications in chess or misapplications?
I don't think so, but like maybe insofar as like I feel like sometimes when I see people make decisions, sometimes they make what I feel are pretty poor decisions. But I mean, there's still like sometimes like I think they would still be better players than me, so it's kind of hard for me to criticize. Um, but yeah, I think like one example of a player that is, let's say, very good at decision making, I think is Hikaru, and I think he's playing extremely close to, let's say, Nash, like given his skill set. So I think other players like in certain positions or even overall could be playing better than him. Um, but he tends to choose positions which he plays very well. And also I think understands psychology very well. So he's choosing the right type of game against the right type of opponent. I think other players like yeah, other players maybe are more focused on the chess. Like they just try to look for the right opening idea, and they don't like. I think sometimes if I find like an opening idea, I sort of think very much about like whether I'd like to play it against a specific opening, or a specific opponent. And I think other players they don't really like if it just shows up on the board, they're willing to play against anybody. Um, and I mean that's kind of the interesting part about chess, right? Is that not everyone's the same, and we all have different styles. There's always like for me this feeling that maybe other players are not optimizing enough, as you said. But I think it's kind of hard thing to say. I don't really focus that much on it because at the end of the day, like, I mean, I'm the person that knows me the best, and so I'm trying to do what's best for me in this scenario. And other people also know themselves the best, right? Like, it's hard for me to claim that, I understand, let's say, Arjun better than he understands himself. It's probably not true. Um, like I think I told a friend recently that, if I was Arjun, I would just never play Waikanze again because he would already be like 28-40 or something without this one tournament. But the thing is, every year he starts off with like losing 20 elo. But he understands that. I mean, he's a better player than me. Let's say, I mean, he gets more experience from these tournaments. Maybe it makes him a better player in the long run, right? So, yeah, it's very difficult to say these kind of things. Like, let's say statistically, he's kind of performed so badly there. I think aside from 21 or 22 when he won the challengers, that doesn't really make sense to play, I think. But yeah, I mean, everyone has their different goals. Everyone understands things differently, and it's definitely very difficult to separate those kind of things.
Are you gonna? Oh well, okay. One follow-up before. Can you just briefly explain to me and maybe other people who don't know when you said Hikaru is playing close to Nash? Are you talking about like a game theorist? And can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so I think we have this concept that I think in like closed games, right? So well defined games like finite games, of which chess is one um that these are basically solved as in like there do exist like best strategies, like strategies that can't be beaten or like exploited. So what that sort of or how that I intuit that is that like um you think like given an opponent, like if I know exactly what you're going to do, um that I can't like beat you in the long run. And now chess is kind of interesting because like everyone is different, like they have different skill sets. So it's sort of like hard, like, okay, like how does that even like what does that mean exactly? But yeah, how I take it to mean is like um I think given Hikaru's skill set, like what the type of things he's good at, he's very difficult to exploit. Like it's very hard to get him into positions that he's uncomfortable in, first of all. And he's very good at like exploiting other people's weaknesses, I think is what I noticed. And so I think a lot of players, like I feel like in interviews, let's say they come from a more traditional background, they like kind of criticize Hikaru, let's say for not playing, um, not playing the elite competition or this and that. But yeah, I think he has a lot of skills that other people maybe don't have. For instance, let's say playing tricky moves when your opponent's in time pressure. Like this is not like something you would ever see in like Dvoretsky's manual, right? So maybe he's not so good at like solving these puzzles, but he's collecting tons and tons of half points because he's making tricky moves under his opponent's time pressure. That's not something he would ever train or like you would ever like most top players I don't think would train that skill. But just from playing so much that he's like I think vastly better than everyone else at that, for instance. And you can tell like other players like for instance just yesterday in Waikanze, Blue Bomb had like +6 position and his opponent had like 2 minutes against his like hour and he drew that position. And I think you would never imagine a player like Hikaru fumbling that opportunity. So I think there are these like small skills like like managing your time, playing well under your opponent's time pressure, like putting like exact pressure, choosing your openings well. These are type of things that he does extremely well, and it makes them very difficult to exploit. And yeah, I think like all those different things, all chess players are kind of different. We all have different approaches to the game. I think many people, let's say, think of Gukesh as a very calculating player. So like let's say, or Arjun is kind of like this gambler, right? So yeah, it kind of makes it very interesting. And it's not, and I think like the more I kind of get into it, even though I'm very new to I think playing chess professionally, I don't know if I really am honestly still, but like yeah, it's kind of like I think I have a lot of respect for different people's styles and how they um how they kind of interface with each other, and possibly as the development of chess goes on, like different kind of archetypes exist in the world, like maybe certain styles get stronger and certain get weaker, just because the type of players in the pool are constantly changing.
So you've played a lot of League, right?
League of Legends.
Yeah,
A reasonable amount. Yeah, I'm surprised you saw that in the interviews.
that's right.
They really the
That
deep cut. Okay,
I gotta do my prep, right?
yeah,
Um,
that's that's well done. Yeah.
like there's different like classes of like heroes, right? Like
Hmm.
tanks and support and all that. And it's like it's kind of like the way you're talking about it. It's like chess, you can think of it as this meta game and different players or different classes. But as like the rules, maybe formats, time controls, all that stuff, opening engine like knowledge, all that changes. Maybe kind of like you're saying, different classes are slightly more advantaged. But what it also makes me think is like maybe you should be a captain some Olympiad team and kind of moneyball them, right?
No, no, I think I yeah, these things are hard though. Because I think people are pretty fixed in their styles and how they think about things. But yeah, it would be fun, of course. I think I'm nowhere near that kind of level. Um, but yeah, I do like to think about these things. I think I had a coach that said, wondering maybe you should focus on playing better moves instead of yeah. So it goes both ways, of course.
Yeah, it's funny you talked about Hikaru and these kind of I don't know, maybe you should invent a term for them, like the skills of playing tricky moves or because, one thing he's done a lot of is like these speed runs where he does like he sacks his queen or something, right? So he's basically acting like Leela queen odds against all these different opponents and trying to figure out the most resilient defense, how to trick people. So yeah, I think that's just something interesting. I don't know if anyone else has pointed that out before.
Right? Yeah, for sure. I think part of what I'm how I try to think about things is, I think a lot of people. I'm not sure, like, if because I have a huge amount of respect for all top players, and I think also sometimes maybe top players just give interesting takes in interviews just to be controversial. Um, but yeah, I think sometimes they criticize, let's say, Hikaru's playstyle or his method of studying. But I think what I try to do more so is I look at all the players and I recognize they've gotten to that level, which is of course far above mine, and I try and understand like, oh, maybe there's like something interesting there, right? Rather than, let's say, working from first principles and then it's more like I work from the result and then try and construct some principles out of that, which I think is maybe, I mean, it's kind of like not how people like to do rigorous, let's say, philosophical work. But yeah, like just seeing like, okay, here are the good players and let's see what they do and maybe what kind of skills do they maybe naturally acquire coming out of that. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we covered a lot of topics already. Yeah, I was gonna ask this later, but you had um a Substack post that was pretty, I would say, for the general chess reader. It was pretty mathematically and economically oriented. But what was the motivation for writing that? And are you planning to write more?
Um, yeah, so I had I wrote a post. So there's been a lot of discussion about streaks recently, by various people, and then at some point, some academic people jumped ship on that. What they were analyzing was like the probability of a certain streak given like your opponent's set or these games, and I think the main method they used was this Monte Carlo analysis. So this is very useful for, let's say, so there are certain like probabilities that we know how to compute the exact probability of, like there are actual expressions, and then there are certain types of problems that are kind of complicated, and so it's not very easy to get these like exact expressions to use. So then they they basically simulate it and then try and get like approximate answer. And so what they were doing was they were kind of just simulating these things and then calculate getting the resulting probabilities out of that. And um, well, part of what I noticed for like actually a couple of years already, but I just somehow was too lazy to ever write anything, was that, well, you can't actually say like because a certain player plays this other player that this is the probability of winning and drawing and losing, because oftentimes if I'm a player in like the chess.com rating pool, I can choose my opponent, and this is kind of like a very classic economics problem that Bob Lucas, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, at the University of Chicago, he posed back in the 70s, this Lucas critique. So how it works was, I think back then they were discussing a lot of like macroeconomic policies. I'm actually not too familiar with this, but yeah, they were discussing a lot of policies, and at some point, they were taking a lot of these factors as like fixed, like growth, money, like the money supply or money printing. I'm not exactly sure. And 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 Lucas, of course, he says, well, wait a minute, like all the people in your economy, like if you change some of the parameters, like they're gonna change their behaviors, right? So you can't assume like people's behaviors are fixed. That like um I mean, I think you see this everywhere, right? Like if you pass a new law, then people are going to adjust based on that law. It's not like you're just gonna get like the entire like nominal effect of that law. So I think part of my critique to some of these analysis was that, um, which I think is pretty obvious for anyone that plays online, is that if you challenge a certain player, online, like let's say I see a player is like slightly overrated and I like to increase my rating because it gives me happiness. That like, I will challenge the overrated player because like I think, I will tend to gain rating from them. Even if, wait, and this is kind of the key point, is that even if I don't actually know the exact probability, because I can still like have an estimate of like the ratio between us, like on average, and like playing against them, I can have like a sense of what their strength is. And then from there, it became kind of an interesting problem. You can kind of simulate these rating deviations as random walks on the like real number line. And I think there's a kind of nice technique that we can use in numerical analysis to solve this problem numerically because again, like it's very difficult to solve certain types of problems, let's say analytically. And so it was not really like meant to be like a serious academic paper or anything because first of all I think this problem is so niche and so I mean I think first of all the original problem of like streaks in chess is so inconsequential that it doesn't really deserve a paper, but somehow people managed to generate a couple of papers out of that. So I think my critique was similarly so niche that it didn't really deserve a a paper, but I thought like I'll just write a simple blog and um, there's some kind of interesting mathematical result because there's a classic problem of, let's say you're just walking on the an integer number line and you're stepping up and down and with equal probability, and this is kind of used sorry I'm getting very into the weeds, but this is kind of used let's say classically to prove that let's say if you're gambling in a casino and you keep gambling, like not just with high probability but actually like with probability 1, so like with certain probability you'll eventually go bankrupt, um, and many other problems. It's a very famous problem, but I think my problem was a little bit different in that the ELO system has this factor where if you get too overrated you'll kind of get pulled back down to your true strength, and so so it's slightly different, like the mathematics work out a little bit differently, so it's kind of a different flavor from what I learned in my undergrad days. So in that sense, it was kind of interesting to tackle because it was kind of new to me. I don't think it's new to the literature, but it was new to me. So it was just kind of personally interesting. Um, yeah, I think it also helps think to me that intuitively, what kind of like natural deviations or swings would we see for players in the rating system, and I think there are a lot of like good examples of this in the real world. There's a concept of people that are very, very easily like fooled by like just essentially random results, right? Like they kind of got the good luck of the draw, and then they sort of think higher results of themselves. And I think in chess we see that a lot, where like certain players right now are extremely hot or they've been on hot streaks, and if you look at, let's say, like the long-term rating curve, it's actually pretty hard to distinguish if like they've just been randomly lucky or not. And so I think, at least personally, when it comes to my results, I'm always a little bit insecure, like even if I'm doing well, that like maybe I'm just lucky or maybe, so like maybe I'm not like really that 2700 strength. Like I don't know if I really deserve this rating. And so it kind of motivates me to work a little bit more because I look at my results and I'm like, well, statistically, it's kind of hard to distinguish this from the zero or like no hypothesis.
Yeah, I guess at some point you just have to play.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I mean, I think I do too much of this like meta analyses, like statistical stuff, and at some point I'm like, oh, like I just hung my bishop, so so that's definitely a problem. I'm very aware.
I think I gathered from your interviews that you're used to playing loads of mostly opponents who are weaker than you from those opens and maybe at chess club when you're in university. And
Mhm.
that's I feel like there's this consensus generally that it's like a bad thing or like people don't like playing against weaker rated opponents and they want to try to play against stronger opponents. Do you feel like there is that feeling in chess overall? Um, and if there is, you know, why do you think you're kind of immune from it?
Mhm. I mean, I think statistically it is true. Like if you look at a long, like, I mean, if you look at like a huge sample size, like, I think like 2600s will generally tend to underperform relative to their rating against like a 2200. Um, I'm not really sure if I'm like immune from that. At some point I saw that statistically I was like outperforming myself at like at, I mean, to be honest, almost all rating ranges. But yeah, I just saw like, okay, it's not really an issue. Like I'm generally like rating neutral or slight rating positive. Um, and so yeah, I don't really mind playing those type of games, of course. And yeah, I think I work a lot and I prepare a lot. I think as long as I generally keep my level high, then it's a pretty good bet. And to the other point that like it's, I mean, I play like all the tournaments I'm invited to, so I've never declined an invitation. But you know, it's kind of like I understand that it's how the world works. First of all, there are younger players than me, and there are also better players than me. And so, you know, why would they want to invite like a college graduate? It's kind of understandable. So yeah, it's kind of how the world works. And so I like playing chess. And so if I'm not playing, you know, let's say close tournaments, then I mean, I prefer playing open tournaments compared to no tournaments at all. And also they have reasonable prizes, especially in America. Um, and yeah, I think when it comes to playing lower rated players, I don't know. I think it's kind of funny that they got rid of this point 0.8 rule because um, Hikaru was, let's say, doing some activities. I was also to some extent beneficiary of this rule. Um, but yeah, I think for me, it kind of, let's say on average, I was gaining around like 0.3 rating points per game against, let's say, below 2400 rated opponents. Um, but on average, like your 2600 player was like losing like crazy, like 1.5 rating points per game against such opponents. So like I was like way outperforming my competition, but in general, my rating was increasing more slowly. Um, yeah, I think it, I don't know. For me, I just kind of like playing the game. It's kind of a good way to get more and more practice. Um, and yeah, I think a lot of people sometimes think because I play all these opens that most of my like rating gain is because of, let's say, many like farming many lower rated players. Um, but in general, it's not really true. Like my largest rating point gain per game has been against 2600 plus opposition, and like on average, I'm gaining like, let's say, like around 1 or 1.5 rating points per game against those players. It's just kind of hard to find those players very consistently, because you have to either play extremely strong tournaments like the World Cup or Grand Swiss, and without those tournaments, it's kind of hard to play against them. And so, like, if I'm not playing against them, then I still prefer to be in practice and get shape. And I think playing chess is, in general, fun. It's like kind of, well, okay. I think most people don't really, let's say, find it extremely enjoyable. Like, there's a very tedious and laborious task, um, in preparing and analyzing. But yeah, I kind of enjoyed it. And I don't know. I like going to tournaments. I like playing. Um, so yeah, I think there's an element of like, okay, if I get invited to good tournaments, then I play, and that's great. And if I don't, then okay, I'll just play these smaller events, and I also enjoy that too. So it's good either way, I think.
Yeah, you seem to have a pretty positive relationship with chess. There was one interview you were talking about the Summer Chess Classic and how you were falling asleep during the games, and you had to devise strategies like calculating the other boards to try to keep yourself awake. Um, do you feel like that's a common issue? Is it just something that's uniquely happening to you? Do you think it's just like a physiological thing, or is there kind of a broader reflection of your stress-free relationship with chess?
Hmm. Well, I don't know. Sometimes I just say things in interviews. But I I think I do think a lot about like my mood and my games and like how I feel during games and whether those games tend to go well or not. Um, I think, for instance, I've found like an extreme negative correlation between walking around during the game and my overall result. I think it's only been very recent that this has happened. So now I just try not to walk around anymore. But yeah, I think these things, you know, like as I said earlier, as chess players, we kind of, I mean, we really only know ourselves very well because, I mean, I'm thinking like all the time about myself, and what I can do to improve. And like that's a little that sounds a bit conceited, but like what is happening inside me. Yeah.
Just something else about chess that you've talked about is, there's certain players that you said you kind of admire because they play the game the right way, maybe with like a certain level of ambitiousness or fearlessness rather than being happy with an easier draw. So,
Hmm.
do you feel like there's some kind of aesthetic quality or characteristic that chess players should have beyond simply playing accurate moves?
Well, I think there's a famous joke with the French and the British. It's like we admire what we don't have, right? So I think to some extent I play a style which is maybe not as courageous. And in general in life, I think I don't tend to take that much risk, and so I think I therefore tend to admire people who I view as more courageous in different aspects. I think it's kind of clear that I'm sort of thinking a lot about, let's say, how to like increase my results in the long run, and how to take like, let's say, tiny advantages, or like just the small percentage points, and just optimize in the long time horizon. So I think for me it's like it kind of mm, I think my style is like very is like somewhat agnostic. Like there's no like specific design style, but maybe there are like certain types of positions I play better, and so for that reason I tend to like maybe it looks a little bit worse. I think for like I think one example of thing I do a lot is like I have four straws with the white pieces, which I think is generally like pretty bad practice. For a lot of, let's say, tournament organizers don't like to see that, and I understand, right? Like if you're hosting an event, you don't want someone just kind of refusing to play a game. Um, but yeah, I think for different circumstances, I kind of feel it's the right decision, and so it's one I'm very comfortable taking on myself, which is I think probably a weakness of mine that I'm not fighting a lot. But yeah, it's I don't know. I don't think there's like specifically a right or a wrong way to do things, but yeah, I think I admire a lot like the mentality of a guy like Ukesh or Arjun, where uh, they have a little bit of like I think this gambler mentality, but yeah, I think their mental is very very strong, and the way they bounce back from losses is extremely admirable to me. And yeah, I think part of like how they are so courageous, I think that's kind of um, let them climb very quickly to the top. And insofar as like, as I said, chess or any kind of game is a little bit like mimetic. And so probably those are the type of traits that I would like to, let's say, acquire or copy from them, and learn to get better at. Yeah.
Kind of 5 years from now, if you weren't doing pro chess, what are the
Hmm.
likely options you think you could be doing?
Uh, yeah. Right now, I think it's a little bit too far to think about. Yeah, I think at some point I would like to go back to school though. I think I was like a pretty bad student at Chicago, and I was like a horrible researcher as well. And I think part of it was just like I kind of lacked the discipline. Like, there are a lot of foundational stuff that I really missed out on, I think, at Chicago, especially because I was going to school at the same time ChatGPT was starting to, let's say, eclipse the average undergrad student. And by the time I was in my senior year, it had just was like clearly smarter than like any undergrad student. And so, um, so at that point, I kind of stopped doing schoolwork. Um, and yeah, I think there are a lot of like really basic stuff that I just don't like never really grasped like really well. Like I think and when I mean like really basic stuff, I mean like linear algebra, like just stuff I basically didn't really understand what it was about. Or like I started taking classes, especially in economics. We were doing a lot of works in like, let's say, econometrics or machine learning, and I was like doing well on the exams and doing well on projects and stuff. But yeah, there's a sense of which like, okay, maybe it would be nice to go a little bit further and just sort of understand what this is about. So I feel like I would like to go back to school at some point. I mean, of course now it's much easier because you can also just open up a textbook and learn by yourself. Um, but yeah, there's kind of a part of me that misses like, oh, maybe I not because it's like useful for anything or that it'll help me get a job or anything like that, but just I don't know, maybe I left something on the table there And I think that's part of why I sort of pursued chess, because I felt like, okay, maybe I didn't like really make the most of my potential in chess, and it'd be nice to kind of see if I took it, let's say, seriously for a bit, like where we could go with that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you're talking about, ChatGPT coming up when you're in school because like engines in chess, it's like maybe okay, you grew up with that, but there's also a sense that, you know, Leela Knight odds is not gonna be a far superior player to you. Just like ChatGPT would be a better student, but you still have enjoyment playing chess. I mean, do you feel like aside from all the practical implications of
Mhm.
analysis, like does the existence of engines make you feel, positively, negatively, or not really anything about chess?
Yeah, I think I really like engines, and just like I'm a huge ChatGPT fan. But yeah, I mean most of my friends were just like absolutely disgusted with chat when it came out, and probably still are. I think yeah, I've kind of always had an over reliance on these kind of tools. Um, Not in the sense like I only listen to what it says, but just like I think I'm very used to using them, and I think if used correctly, they're like great accelerators. Um, of course, there's like no. I think one mistake people often make is they don't really invest enough time into things. So you can't really get the same results without investing a large amount of time into things. Um, I think using the engine can sometimes trick you into thinking you can do things faster. Yeah. But I sort of think like, okay, if I spend like 8 hours without the engine, or if I spend 8 hours with the engine, like it's still quite useful, I think, in that sense. And I think where the engine helps the most is it can help you understand a lot of positions and structures much faster than you otherwise would. Like, I think a lot of times you can read books, or you can, let's say, like see what other people have said, or see what other people did, let's say in their games. But the engine does show you like what the correct move is, and it's always the responsibility of, let's say, the human or the operator to try to understand why things are. Um, and I think engines have gotten so much better recently that um, it feels to me that, well, like they always kind of say what is true, and that's kind of a very useful thing, I think, because you don't always in life know like whether something is correct or not. And so I think I have like a very strong belief in. I mean, like what is correct does matter. Um, and I think all the other things like understanding and that kind of stuff are sort of like useful abstractions to help us remember what the engine says, right? So like it, we I think that's kind of the main goal of the work I do in general. I think what most top players do is like we have these like thousands of lines of engine analysis, and then it's kind of your job as the human to abstract away all that analysis into like, maybe like a couple, like I don't know, like one page or a couple paragraphs about like what a position is really about, right? Like our goal is to trade off these pieces, or like this piece would like to go here, or more often it's kind of like a flow chart, right? Like if white does this plan, then black does this plan. If white does this other plan, then black can do this other plan, and then these are the pieces that they'd like to exchange, and so on. And so I think how useful it is kind of depends on the user. I used to say about ChatGPT, which I think all my friends hated, that like there are no like ChatGPT never gives wrong answers. There's only wrong prompts. Not saying that I was like a prompt engineer or anything, but yeah, I think it's kind of very much how I view things. That like these are just tools, and if they're giving wrong outputs, I think that's more about the user than it is about um the tool itself. So I think it's tremendously helpful. Yeah, I think they're a pretty good thing for chess.
But yeah, thinking about your enjoyment of chess, and nostalgia, something you've mentioned is just like there are some crazy games that you enjoy and played before, um, but at this point you've kind of matured too much, or like it's not a style that really makes sense for you to play anymore. So how do you feel just about your enjoyment of chess? Like how has it changed over time?
I mean, I think my enjoyment of chess has kind of waxed and waned, and I think every chess player goes through this cycle, especially when we started very young. I think if you talk to any prodigy, I think that we've all have had periods of intense burnout, and periods where we really like never looked at chess, and hadn't looked at chess for months and years. And I also went through that period for maybe like 4 or 5 years. But I was in high school and college at that time. So yeah, I did have I was homeschooled for maybe like 4 years, and I was doing a lot of chess then. And then I finished high school, and then I also went to college on top of that. Yeah, I think it's a very common thing in chess. Just, I mean, many prodigies, and also like even players that are very strong when they're young, and then let's say no longer decide to continue pursuing chess, and went on to do many other excellent things in life. And so, um, yeah, I think it's just a life thing. Like it's hard to do only one thing your entire life. I think most people are. I mean, it's not really like a way to live life. I think it's not really meant to be like that. Because I don't know, there are like many interesting things in the world, and many things are like very beautiful. And so, yeah, I think chess is just like one aspect of that, right? Um, I think I began to enjoy it more when I was in college and had more of a break. Um, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was a good way to make money, so that will always be very motivating. Um, and also just yeah, I don't know. I would go to tournaments with friends, and I'm I think maybe just by luck or just by happenstance, somehow I was like winning a lot when I was in college. Even though I hadn't played really for a couple of years and I wasn't really studying, but I don't know. I was just going to tournaments and like and kind of just like winning all the big opens in the U.S. And like not with much difficulty at that. Um, yeah, I feel like when I look back at like my chess self when I was like 15 or something, like really it was incredible. Like sometimes I look at the games I play and it's just like amazing that I play like that at such a young age. Um, but yeah, I think my results are much better now, and I think part of it is because when I do play the game, like it is like I am much more motivated. Like I'm much more focused. I do the work before the tournament. I like I when I sit at the board, it's like okay, this is kind of my life and this is my like goal right now, and I think that motivation helps a lot because I feel like when I'm in worse positions, like I do spend a lot of energy trying to defend. When I'm in better positions, yeah, I'm still working on it, but I'm trying to convert. Like, and it's kind of the little things. Like it just gives you extra motivation in that like fifth or sixth hour when you're trying to defend, where other players might just kind of give up, or you might not try that hard. And and now I'm kind of like okay, let me really try and save this game, or let me really try and convert. And compared to let's say when I was 15 and just kind of playing off of like raw talent, but maybe not much of anything else. Um, so yeah, I think like motivation really matters a lot in terms of results, and I think it actually matters like an outsized amount. Like in terms of yeah, just all the little things at the board and before the game that I do. Like I'm not perfect, of course. Like I think I could be much more disciplined, but definitely better than I used to be. I think that's kind of um, I mean, I'm very happy with where I'm at. Like, I mean, it's kind of all you can be to just be better than you used to be, right?
Wrapping up, is there anything you're looking forward to outside of chess and the coming year?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I used to have this I had this recent realization that I tend to run like very well in even numbered years. Um, and so as a 2026 as an even numbered year, I was like, oh, okay, let's go. Time to start going hard, I guess. Um, I, I think it's for whatever reason it tends to be true. I have this like very cyclical nature about myself. Um, I think 2025 I was like very choppy, like very up and down. In certain areas. Um, and yeah, I was like investing a little bit in that period of time, and Trump was doing his thing, and so I sort of that was like very interesting times, but I mean it was like very up and down, right? And chess wise as well, it was like, mm, I mean generally like overall it was pretty good. I think I finished the year like all right, but yeah, I definitely had a feeling that I left a lot on the table in terms of like let's say a lot of my professional results, personal as well. Yeah, I mean I can't really say like whether it's good or not, right? So I mean you have to wait until it's over then, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, hopefully it's a good year. Thanks for taking time to talk. Next time, maybe we can talk about all the questions in life that statistics and chat can't answer.
Oh no, that's my exact weakness. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.